ask yourself, is this problem a chapter of the book or is it the whole book? Maybe it's a situation, maybe we need to work through it, we need to come out the other end, or hey, is this just kind of gurgling issues that have always been there that I've been overlooking that now I'm reaching my limit on? And so if it's no, this is the book, it's always been this way, that might be a sign that this isn't a great friendship for you. But if this is a chapter, then that's a sign that, okay, maybe I need to stick it out, talk through this, give it some time.
On this episode of Love, Happiness, and Success, I am speaking to Dr. Marisa Franco on the psychology of attachment theory and how we can apply that understanding to our platonic relationships, our friendships, particularly in the context of challenging relationships, friendships that may even feel toxic or unhealthy for us. So, Dr. Marisa, I'm so happy to be here with you today. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so in this next segment, I'd love to get your insight into a challenging situation that I think many people can relate to. And that is, what, in your experience, makes it so difficult to let go of friendship sometimes, even if intellectually we know that we're not having that good of a time, but feel this compulsion to maintain attachments to some people. I know you go into this deeply in your book, Platonic, The Science of Attachment, and how we can apply it to making and keeping friends. But can you share your expertise with us a little bit here?
Yeah, so there's actually a model of that looks at factors that predict whether we stay in a relationship. And you
Hmm.
would think it's just how satisfied we are in the relationship, but actually that's just one of three things. The other two things are how much have you invested already, right? So
Mm.
childhood friends, they're really hard to leave behind, or you made a new friend and you went to Cancun together and then you realize they're toxic, but it's hard to let it go because you already invested so much.
And you have the tattoos, the matching tattoos. You're
Yeah, you have
bound
the
for
matching
life.
news.
Okay.
Right, right. And the third factor is your view of alternatives. So
Hmm.
do you feel like if I don't have this friend, then I have no one else? Or do you feel like, okay, if I dump this friend, then I'm going to have other options? And so those are the three different factors. And if even if you're unsatisfied with a friend, if you do have high investment, you've already invested a lot, or if you feel like there's not many other options for me, then you're likely going to stay in a friendship, even if it's
Okay. So that if you want to get serious about how to perhaps set different boundaries, you have a few different levers to pull. One of them, perhaps, is investing in other friendships so that you feel like you have more available options. But I'm thinking with the others, perhaps maybe doing some reality testing, challenging some of the thoughts and beliefs that are contributing to your feeling attached to a person that maybe you don't want to be attached to as much. And this can be hard, especially I think with like childhood friends, somebody that you've known for 20 or 30 years. In your experience, what can that look like?
I say with friendships, right? It's complicated
Mm.
because sometimes a friendship can have what looks like a toxic stage, but not be a toxic friendship because there's some
Oh,
situational issue going on, your friend's going through something. So I say when you're assessing a friendship and whether I'd like to continue, ask yourself, is this problem a chapter of the book or is it the whole book?
that's
Are we having this
great.
issue? Yeah, recently, maybe it's a situation, maybe we need to work through it, we need to come out the other end, or hey, is this just a kind of gurgling issues that have always been there that I've been overlooking that now I'm reaching my limit on? And so if it's no, this is the book, it's always been this way, that might be a sign that this isn't a great friendship for you. But if this is a chapter, then that's a sign that, okay, maybe I need to stick it out, talk through this, give it some time.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just go here for a second. I love this metaphor. Is it a chapter or is it the book? And so to go back and get perspective on the timeline can help you assess some of that. But even in the event that you do say, this is probably a chapter, I'd love to hear more about your perspective for how to go about navigating that with your friend. Because the reason why is that I think most of the relationship advice or relationship strategies that we hear for how to address things with a romantic partner or somebody that you're married to. But I think frequently people can feel inhibited from using some of the same strategies for a friendship. I think that it can be easier for somebody to avoid having these conversations when maybe they would, in fact, go there with a romantic partner, because I think for many people that just feels like more part of the experience of being in a romantic relationship. And I think sometimes we don't have good models for how to do that kind of emotional intimacy with friends when there's something wrong.
You're absolutely right. People are less likely to bring up conflict in a
Yeah.
friendship than in a romantic partnership. And what this means is that a lot of friendships die from what is left unsaid. And it's like
Mm.
little things are accumulating over time that could have been addressed and remedied. And I think people are really afraid that if I bring up conflict, my friend's going to abandon me, not knowing that if you don't bring it up, this is going to end
Yeah,
too, because
exactly.
you're both getting fed up on this underlying issue. It doesn't make the relationship more sustainable for you to not bring up conflict. And so
Hmm.
this was a big growth area of mine. But when I was writing Platonic, I saw this study that having open empathic conflict is actually linked to deeper intimacy.
Oh,
And I
yes.
also and I also read about people that really value friendship and that they tend to have to talk through things more, rather than just ignore them. And Virginia Goldner, she is the psychoanalyst, and she talks about how you can have flaccid safety in a friendship where you're close to someone because you're pretending nothing's wrong, or you could have this dynamic safety where you
Mm.
know every time you rupture, you can repair. And that sets precedent for the future. Whenever we have issues, we can actually come back and heal from them. And it just makes your relationship so much more robust. So I suggest that if there's a conflict, and I know that there's something I need to bring up when I'm ready to withdraw from the friendship, that's a sign that I need to bring something up. And how you do it is really important. You still have to be kind even when you're in conflict. So, what does
Mm.
that look like? Framing the conversation with reminding the person that you're doing this because you love them, that, hey, there's just been something on my mind that I want to talk through with you because you're really important to me and I don't want any challenges to exist between us. Sharing the I statements. This happen instead of you're a bad friend, you disappointed me. Perspective taking, asking your friend, I was just wondering what was going on for you when that happened, giving them a chance to share their side. And so throughout the whole conversation, you're trying to find a way to meet both of your needs rather than have your needs met at the expense of theirs or have their needs met at the expense of yours. And so you can
Right.
also use like saying your position and their position and then saying how do we move forward from here. So it sounds like it's really important to me that you show up on time, and you're saying that showing up on time is really hard for you and not something you've been able to do in your friendship. So what does that look like for us to move forward with this in a way that works for both of us?
Fantastic. Just opening the door in an emotionally courageous way, though, that also requires somebody on the other side of that being able and willing to meet you in that space and have an equally emotionally mature conversation, which I'm guessing can provide you with a lot of information at the very least around whether or not there's enough there for you if you are going into this in these beautiful ways Dr. Marissa is describing, with somebody who is becoming highly defensive or lashing
Yeah.
out or going into blame mode or victimization may be what you needed to know, but perhaps at least you tried.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think it's important to remember that I think sometimes people feel like the conflict didn't go well and I did something wrong. And
Mm.
that's not necessarily the case, right? The other person just might not be in a place to hear you. And I think there's a psychologist, I think her name is Sherry Campbell, but I can fact check this later. And she says the most toxic person is the least confronted. So the person having the least conflict of all is like the most toxic one. So the fact that you're bringing up and addressing these issues is normal and part of being in relationship to other
Yeah.
people. And I think you're exactly right that sometimes this won't go well because the other person isn't in a place to hear you.
Yeah.
I had a student, Nick, who we talk about, I teach a class on how to make friends, and
Mm.
he said his conflict didn't go well. But he said, now that I understand attachment styles, I was able to remind myself this is not the rule. And so I
Right.
think that's also really important because sometimes we're so scared of having that conflict. We have it once, it goes poorly, and we're just like, I'm never going to bring up
Yeah,
any.
never again. Okay, this is so good. And while we're here, let me ask you about just another dimension of this. As a therapist, I not infrequently talk to people, my clients, who are very worried about friends that they care about deeply because they view the friends as going down a really dark path. And this can take the form of untreated mental health stuff. They are observing their friend engaging in a series of highly toxic or damaging relationships that is hard to bear witness to. Certainly substance use disorders or engaging in other things that person A views as being really self-destructive. And then often too, I think where it can become very hard for people is that if they're in a friendship with someone who then wants to talk a lot about the emotional fallout and the difficulties that are coming up because of their involvement in all of these things, that person A is, well, yeah, it can be hard to maintain that relationship, but also I think people can really care a lot about their friends. They feel guilty about abandoning them, but I think also there's this genuine desire to help a friend who they see as spiraling, right? And maybe even that friendship is one of the few healthier attachments that other person has, but they feel so stuck. And I'm wondering if you can speak to this experience at all, particularly around how to, I don't know, is there anything that a friend can do to initiate a courageous conversation to help their friend perhaps get some feedback, or because I think that's what people want to do, but they often feel inhibited. They fear that it won't go well. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts? And I know this is
Well, first,
complex, but mm-hmm,
yeah, the first thing I think it's important to note is that
mm-hmm,
you don't have control over your friend.
of
You can
course.
influence them, but you
Yeah.
cannot control them, which means that if they're going down a bad path, it's not because you weren't there to save them, it's because you fundament they're their own person with their own will. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind. Not saying that you can't influence them, but I would say that when you want to offer them some perspective on their behavior, trying to come off non-judgmentally and coming from a place of love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the ways we do that is instead of imposing, this is my view of what's good or bad for you and what you should or should not be doing, instead reflecting back what they're saying. You've said to me that, oh man, like you're not able to get up for work some days because you're really up late drinking. And that makes me wonder if you want to stop drinking as much. Have you thought about that? Just because you can always hear the ambivalent when someone's engaged in
Mm.
destructive patterns. If you're listening close enough, you can hear that there's some ambivalence to it. And so
Yeah.
you could almost bring out or draw out their voice as a way for them to A, not feel judged, and B, have buy-in for what you're saying, because you're literally saying back what they said to you and offering that to them, that friend, I love you and I know you want to persist in this relationship, but you've also told me that you really want to be in relationships where you feel good, and I just wanted to share that with you. Like, how are you reconciling those two things? And then offering that curiosity where it's not just don't do this, it's hey, what's your perception, what's your experience, what's going on for you. And the third thing that I would say is don't underestimate the value of just, even if you can't save them from their darkness, the fact that you are just there and that you are available and that you can hang out with them and be present with them, even when you're not even talking about the thing that they're doing that's destructive, that is very meaningful. That may be their one experience of healthy connection. That may be their one experience of hope. That may be their one
Mm-hmm.
experience where they're like, okay, my life can be different from this, or I can be in relationships where I'm treated really well. You don't necessarily need to be trying to like pull them out of their destruction to be easing them out of it through your very friendship with them.
Amazing. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much. And I think that's a good reminder that the presence of the bond can be so healing and so helpful, even if you feel like you're not doing enough or you feel a little bit helpless, is to not underestimate the power of that bond. So
Yeah.
this has been so helpful, and thank you. And so in the next chapter of this, I'd really like to dig a little bit deeper into getting your thoughts about how to actually end a friendship with courage, grace, compassion, if you have determined that is really in everybody's highest and best, in everybody's well-being. But we'll move into this. And if you have been listening to this and are enjoying this conversation, I hope that you stay with me and Dr. Marisa. Click on the next video in this series and get Dr. Marisa's advice on how to call it quits if that's what we actually need to do.